Chapter 1350. Onyxia already knew that Duque was going to fight against the Burning Legion, and she only needed to hold on for a while. Who would have thought that Thun would be so fierce? Its attack pattern was the same as Duque had said, but the number of tentacles had increased by several times. One giant claw tentacle could easily make a mountain giant kneel, and one ray of light from the giant eye tentacle could make an ancient dragon enter a state of near death, doubting the dragon's life before it died. For a moment, Onyxia began to wonder if she had hugged the wrong person. If she had to die bitterly to be a capable mount, then she might as well have been stubborn from the start. At the last moment, just as the Black Dragon Princess began to let her imagination run wild, an angelic voice suddenly rang in her ears. Transform. That was her Duque's voice. Onyxia had never realized that her master's voice was so pleasant to the ears. Whoa. I didn't suffer in vain after being tamed so many times. Without any hesitation, Onyxia quickly shrunk and transformed into a human. Alexstrasza, who was rushing over to help, was shocked. Onyxia's ultimate transformation spell had yet to reach maturity. Transforming into a human would certainly reduce the area of attack, but at the same time, her defense would inevitably be greatly reduced. If she was hit in her dragon form, there might still be some scraps left, but if she was hit in her human form, there would be nothing left. Immediately, the Red Dragon Queen saw the purple and blue light that appeared behind the princess at the critical moment, the light of the portal. Her heart immediately returned to her chest. This kid is finally back. Duque suddenly pulled and immediately pulled the humanoid Black Dragon out of Thun's main cannon's killing range. However, Duque only had time to pull her into the spatial crack before the terrifying ultra-high energy tore open the portal that Duque did not have time to close. The berserk magic power and divine power that had nowhere to vent easily caused a small-scale collapse in that part of the space. Even with a Tiche, Duque could not protect this spatial tunnel. In an extremely embarrassing situation, Duque held the staff in his left hand and pulled with his right hand, using almost all of his strength to pull the Black Dragon Princess out of the spatial tunnel. Bang! The bystanders only saw a flash before their eyes, and the black dragon that was supposed to be hit disappeared. Then they saw Duque suddenly rolling around with the mage who had transformed into Countess Katrana. Whoa! Onyxia was pinned under him in an M-shaped position. When Duque came back to his senses, his face was full of embarrassment. The dragon under him blushed and whispered, "If you want to tame a dragon, can we talk about it after defeating Thun?" Duque was speechless. Nosdormu and Isra entered the arena once again. The two giant dragons that tore through space were very eye-catching. Only Orgrim whispered to Thrall, "I suddenly have a good idea. If you can deal with a certain dragon king like Duque did with Onyxia." Just then, Alexstrasza suddenly showed her power and bit off a tentacle of the giant eye that had reached over to seek death. In the next second, because the red dragon wanted to expel Thun's evil divine power, it used the power of life to evaporate the foreign substance in its mouth, causing the dragon's mouth to overflow with thick mist. Looking at the bloody mouth that was flowing with blood and Thun's pus, Thrall's face darkened. He shook his head like a rattle and refused to do anything. It had to be said that there was something called talent. Humans' talent in making friends was not to be underestimated. Focusing his attention back, Duque suddenly found that Thun was far more difficult to deal with than he had thought. In Warcraft there were so many versions and there were so many bosses that people almost couldn't remember their names. There were not many that could be branded in the minds of players and make countless players cry. Thun was definitely one of the best. Duque didn't remember if Thun was ranked first, but he was definitely in the top 3. In the earliest version of the game, Thun was simply unbeatable. No guild had any way to deal with it. Now, fate seemed to be repeating this history that would torment people to madness. The 4 dragon aspects attacked together, but Thun was not at a disadvantage at all. So what if his body was injured? Its ability to recover seemed to be endless. Its body could be regenerated if it was bitten off, and its tentacles could also be regenerated if they were broken. Everyone even had the illusion that they were not fighting against a powerful monster, but rather planet Azeroth itself. No matter how much damage they dealt to Thun, it could be replenished with energy from the planet and regenerate indefinitely. The only good news now was that the void battlefield had been settled. The 4 dragon aspects could now fight with all their might. At the same time, Duque also made a move. "Don't fight with me for the control of the elements." Seeing that Duque was about to attack, Malygos warned Duque fiercely. A single sentence of "dragon that angers me will be in danger." For a moment, a scene appeared in Duque's mind, In Stormwind City's King's Valley, the hanging dragon head had turned into the blue head of Malygos. *CK. Malygos, you claim to be the king of magic, but what are you doing now? A wide area cone of ice was sent over, and 70% of the magic power was in the air, more than 20% was resisted by sea thun, and less than 10% caused actual damage. Duque rolled his eyes. That's right. Malygos considered himself the world's strongest ruler of magic, and in terms of magic power output, he was indeed above Duque. If Duque's magic power output per unit of time was compared to a train with a total load of thousands of tons, then Malygos was at least a cargo ship with a load of hundreds of thousands of tons. But it was precisely because of the difference in magic power demand that it seemed that Malygos' magic damage was higher. The dragon aspects didn't have a system elf, so it was impossible to calculate that in terms of magic power, Duque's damage was higher. Moreover, the dragon aspects were all siblings, so they worked better together. Okay, for Alexstras's sake, I'll hold it in. Duque was a demigod, so of course he couldn't just be a bystander. Didn't he see that after Onyxia got up, she turned back into her dragon form and changed to cleaning the tentacles at the edge of the underground cave? A thought popped up in Duque's mind. He acted on it. All of a sudden, a huge illusory three-dimensional magic network formed under Duque's feet. It was like a spider's web as dense as a hedgehog's. 6 types of elemental light bloomed at the same time. Malygos turned his dragon head and almost wanted to curse, but he suddenly realized that Duque didn't occupy the magic he needed. The magic that Duque used came from different corners of the elemental domain. The elemental world was very vast, and as a pure dimensional elemental world, not to mention a demigod, even a dozen true gods couldn't instantly use up the power of an elemental world. Chapter 1351. For the sake of convenience, the point closest to Azeroth was usually used to open the passage to the elemental realm. Because there was magic flowing all year round, those points were also the easiest. Now that Duque had avoided these magic absorption points, Malygos naturally lost the right to scold Duque. Umph. With a cold snort, the Blue Dragon King turned to focus on attacking Sea Thun. Groups of magic elements gathered on the battlefield at a speed visible to the naked eye. They quickly condensed into something like a dark cloud, and then, accompanied by a thunderous sound, a sudden hail poured down. They constantly combined with each other in the air, forming a sharp existence like a sharp sword. Almost instantly, they pierced through the tentacle forest that had just risen. The hail was endless, and as the elemental group expanded, it continued to extend in all directions. Dozens of ice prisms the size of ballistae pierced through the tentacles of the eyeball, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Sea Thun's natural lightning magic and ice elements in the purple eyeball clashed fiercely, causing an even bigger explosion. The tentacle limbs that were blown away fell on the heads of the people around them like a landslide. These corrosive broken limbs were definitely not good things. For a moment, there was a lot of screams, and the allied healers were immediately busy. Kalia had improved a lot. In this situation, she did not chant a long and stinky incantation to activate a large area of effect, prayer of healing. Instead, she quickly cast Holy Word, Shield, on the unlucky ones in the center. A translucent shield protected them from further damage caused by the sputtering pus. When the 7 guys all had shields, it was just in time for the Holy Knights to quickly heal them with Holy Light Flash. The chain of healing could be said to be perfect. Every unlucky guy cast a grateful look at Kalia. Seeing that Malygos didn't care about the life and death of mortal heroes, Duque was even more certain of his thoughts. Beside him, 6 elemental creatures of different forms emerged. They formed an even larger composite magic array and chanted loudly. The rhythmic incantation gathered 6 invisible forces in the air, which eventually converged on Duque. Not only did the Sea Thun's tentacles around Duque bounce back as if they were struck by lightning, even the nearby air pressure dropped a bit. The magical elements summoned by Malygos in the air suddenly paused, and then quickly dissipated as if blown away by a strong wind. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. On the ground, the violent wind that was stirred up out of nowhere carried the scattered gravel and spun into the air. They gathered together in a frenzy, forming a huge sand tornado, surrounding Duque like the most loyal guards. In the blink of an eye, the massive magic array beneath Duque's feet revealed the shadows of weapons that were suspended in midair at a perpendicular angle to the ground. This is Dark Strike? Wild Blade? Spider Devil Spike? Undefeatable Will. Countless weapons hung in the air, and many people recognized these epic weapons from places such as the Molten Core, Blackwing's Nest, Naxxramas, and Mount Hyjal. No one knew what Duke was trying to do by summoning the projections of these weapons. Even more so, no one understood why huge wheels appeared around Duke's body. They only heard Duke's incantation sounded, "I am an illusory man. The dream is the body, the will is the blood. Magic is the sky, glory is all." Peaking at fate, traversing the past and the present. Through countless battlefields, never once defeated. Unaware of life. Fearless of death. I have never been defeated. I have never been understood. Standing at the peak of time and space, intoxicated in victory. Past lives have never had meaning. This life is only born to protect. Therefore, I hereby declare. Wheel of Victory never stops. With the incantation, more weapons were constructed in the magic circle, and they began to turn from illusory to real. First, the translucent dotted lines became real outlines, then the materials used to construct the weapons were restored, the magic circle sealed in the weapons by skilled craftsmen when the weapons were cast was restored, the corresponding energy was injected, and finally the age of the weapons was restored. At first there were 10, 20, then 100, 1,000, countless weapons formed an enormous wheel spinning crazily just like the wheel of history rolling forward, unstoppable. The wheel rolled forward, crushing anything that belonged to Si Thun. At this moment, the heroes felt that a string in their hearts was faintly touched. Many figures and things appeared in front of them, as if they were seeing the shocking battles that Duke had experienced under his leadership. This was not like a historical drama made up by bards, but an illusion that really existed in history. The power that Duke had at this time was based on the chain of victories piled up. And Duke seemed to be pushing the wheel of fate extremely smoothly, faster and faster. Only in this way could all resistance be crushed. Si Thun's tentacles, which had annoyed the four dragon aspects, were almost instantly destroyed as soon as they appeared. A smaller eyeball tentacle? Obsidian blade had long been hungry and thirsty, and with a slash the weapon and the tentacle were destroyed in an instant. A smaller claw tentacle? Claw of lava rage went up and tore it apart. Giant eye tentacle? 3 hands of magic simultaneously used, counterspell, instantly stirring up the elements, enough to make the eyeball tentacle choke back the whip magic like it was constipated. The only problem was the giant claw tentacle. Even though it was like a torrential rain pouring down, nailing more epic-grade weapons fiercely, this powerful tentacle still whipped and attacked all the targets it could hit regardless. However, the fact that Duke could flatten so many annoying tentacles in one breath not only shocked the mortal heroes, but even the 4 dragon aspects were surprised. Suddenly, everyone only saw a blur in front of them and 4 huge lips, like walls growing out of the ground, spun and wrapped around Duke. In the gap between the lips, everyone could even see some teeth that weren't too big but were extremely sharp. Obviously, the owner of this wriggling mouthpiece was Si Thun. The size of this mouthpiece alone was enough for mortals to look up at. The heroes not far away could even clearly smell the stench. Everyone had read Duke's strategy and everyone knew that the most important part of the strategy was that someone had to be swallowed by Si Thun, but that was disgusting. Chapter 1352. Just in case, Duke activated Ice Barrier in advance. He didn't have the thought of using his delicate skin and tender flesh to resist the sharpness of Si Thun's mouth, which had thousands of sharp teeth. As expected, after entering, Duke felt countless sharp teeth scraping against the ice formed by highly condensed ice elements outside the barrier. Fortunately, it was his senses and not his sense of hearing that came into play. Otherwise, wouldn't the sound of countless claws scraping against glass kill him? Wait a minute. Something's wrong. He had never heard of Si Thun's huge mouth swallowing people with so many teeth. If even a mage like Duke found it hard to deal with, then wouldn't the other unshielded professions be done for? Duke came back to his senses and looked at the system notification. Warning. Warning. You have been swallowed by the descendant of Oro of the Sandworm race. If you do not improve your condition, you may suffer serious damage. *CK. Did I make a mistake? Duke's face darkened and he exploded on the spot. Do you think I'm Hello Kitty if I don't get angry? A mere descendant of Oro was naturally unable to block the connection between Duke and the magic net. A huge amount of ice elements began to gather in the descendant's body. Saffron? Duke shouted in his soul. Understood, Ice Dragon replied on the spot. The layer of ice in Oro's heir's throat was growing thicker by the second, and in the span of a few breaths, it had turned into a giant block of ice that was firmly lodged in its throat. Then an incomparably violent draconic aura began to attack its low IQ brain, shaking its rationality. Very easily this mini-boss went completely berserk. It, who had originally retreated into the ground, jumped out again, ignoring the fierce attacks of the mortal heroes of the allied army, and charged straight ahead. In front of it was its boss C. Thun. Who would have thought that it would recklessly smash a large bloody hole in the lower part of its own gang leader's incense burner-shaped lower body. It even waved its 6 caliceri below its mouthpart as fast as lightning, trying to drill into it. Traveling through the sand was just an instinctive action for the sandworms of the Oro race. But for C. Thun it was pain. It should be said that the pain in his heart was greater than the pain in his body. On account that your father, Oro, had sacrificed his life for the country, I was kind enough to let you be my hired thugs, but you actually dare to rebel? It did not matter if Oro's descendant had done it intentionally or not. In any case, it had attacked its master, so it had to die. The newly emerged Sea Thun tentacles ignored the attacks of the mortal heroes and viciously attacked Oro's children. Grandpa Sea Thun's chrysanthemum sacred claw. Grandpa Thunus love lash. Here. Your first master's dismemberment technique. To Oro's descendant, however, this was nothing short of suffering. The intense pain and frenzy drove this monster to tear at everything it came into contact with. Outsiders could only see that the lower half of Oro's descendant's body was splattered with pieces of internal organs and blood, while the upper half that had burrowed in was spurting out Sea Thun's bodily fluids. Was this the Sea Thun clan's love-hate relationship? At this moment, a golden light pierced through Oro's descendant's lower abdomen. In the next instant, Duque appeared in the crowd, his face pale. Even with Duke's so-called demigod-level physique, he felt like vomiting after being shaken so much that he felt like vomiting. Duke suddenly understood why Medivh, as a demigod, had been able to stab him in the chest and kill him with a single stab of his sword. Although a mage-type demigod had the most powerful elemental attack power, while the heavens had bestowed upon Pharaoh such powerful destructive power, they had also very fairly made Pharaoh a very fragile person. Once his magical defenses were broken, his demigod body would at most be comparable to a mortal heroic paladin's body. The term thick skin was probably not fated to have anything to do with Duque for the rest of his life. After he came out, he only lost his composure for a moment. Duque immediately became that sage-like demigod with a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right. Seeing this, Thrall was stunned and couldn't help but cry out. Did he calculate the sandworm's threat to the team and deliberately let himself be swallowed? 30 meters away, Queen Sylvie's ears twitched. On her beautiful face, her facial muscles formed a rather awkward curve. No, you're thinking too much. That guy must have seen wrongly. It was at this moment that Duque suddenly felt that something was wrong. As if he was possessed by a ghost, he turned around. This time, the big mouth that rose up from the ground behind him finally overlapped with the image of the giant mouth tentacle in his memory. However, being swallowed twice in a row wasn't a pleasant experience. For a moment, Duque almost wanted to throw Gavin Rad, who was asking for a beating, into it and let him be swallowed instead. At this moment, Orgrim suddenly said, "Before you, there was a blonde priestess who was swallowed." *CK. Kalia got shot again? Looking around and seeing that Kalia was indeed nowhere to be seen, Duque jumped in without thinking. In a pitch-black world, the blonde priestess shook her head hard, trying to wake herself up from the dizziness as soon as possible. Almost instinctively she gave herself a holy word, shield. She didn't know how long she had been in a daze. Maybe it was a long time, or maybe it was only 2 or 3 seconds before she remembered what had happened before she fainted. She had been swallowed by the giant mouth tentacle. Even though the mouth of the giant mouth wasn't fast, it was as slow as a turtle in the eyes of a thief. Unfortunately for a priestess, it was as slow as a snail. As a result, the snail was robbed by the turtle without any suspense. The giant mouth swallowed her in one gulp. When she woke up, she hurriedly struggled to sit up. It was so dark that she couldn't see her fingers in front of her. No matter how many battles the girl had experienced and how she usually appeared quiet and strong in front of others, some characteristics wouldn't change as she grew up. At this moment she fumbled around on the ground in a panic, and with great difficulty she grabbed her staff. Now that she had the staff, she felt a lot more at ease. She quickly cast a cantrip-level spell, Illumination. The situation around her made her feel a little nauseous. The seemingly vast hall was actually Sea Thun's huge stomach, with rough walls squirming all around. She didn't know if it was the stomach wall or something else. Ah! She let out a scream because she was shocked to find that her boots had stepped into something soft. The strong corrosive pain stung her, and the entire epic rank boots melted. Oh my god! I've been swallowed, I'll be melted. Thinking of this possible ending, her beautiful face paled. Fortunately, she didn't forget the way Duque had taught her. She almost rolled and crawled towards the nearby high ground. Chapter 1353. The air in Si Thun's stomach was abnormally foul. Apart from the sour smell of internal organs, there was also the typical smell of rotting corpses. Almost as soon as Duque was swallowed, he opened the system elf scan and shouted, "Kalia, are you okay? Are you still alive? Kalia, please don't let anything happen to you. If something happens to you, then I'll be a failure as a demigod." Thinking of this, Duque actually felt a little scared to the point that he was about to tremble. Frost elements spread under his feet, giving Duque a relatively safe environment. He looked around hoping to find Kalia in this damned place that was half submerged in corrosive acid. But he was also afraid of seeing a cold, broken, beautiful corpse. After searching for a while with these conflicting thoughts, the system suddenly notified him that there was a pair of legs on a protruding rock not far away. This discovery almost made Duque die of sadness. But before he could get closer to take a look, he was relieved. It was a pair of night elf leather boots. It must have been some daring elf thief who had sneaked in not long ago and tragically died. Duque took a light breath of the cool air filtered by the ice shield and began to move towards higher ground. Although Kalia's movements were not as nimble as the other women, she had seen the world and experienced great battles. At this time she should have at least run to the predetermined location. Without even needing to throw a few fireballs, Duque could see in the blurry darkness that there was a high ground in his 9 o'clock direction. If history did not lie to him, that was the only exit. The elements here were already quite chaotic, so he could not use flash. Duque activated his magic and ice shield, moving quickly against the debris falling from above. Soon he found a human body on the top of a small hill. Duque rushed over and pulled, his hands full of corrosive mucus. If it wasn't for the holy light in her body forming a small protective layer on the surface of her skin, if it wasn't for the thinnest acid here and the extra extreme nature potion protecting her, Kalia might have been a corpse by now. At this moment, Duque looked as if he had found a rare treasure and let out a long sigh of relief. He skillfully controlled the frost elements to melt into a stream of water, gently washing the disheveled yet beautiful female body in front of him. His upper body was exposed to the air, and he just happened to fall on the stone so he didn't suffer any damage. Her lower body. Ugh, although she wasn't injured, her dress and everything else had been melted and torn. If it wasn't for the strange atmosphere, Duque would have silently praised her in his heart. Using the ice shield to repel the other elements, Duque turned her body over with his left hand and used the holy light to expel the filth from her body. At the same time he placed his hand on her chest to check if she still had a heartbeat. At the same time he called out to her urgently, "Kalia, Carly." Halfway through, Duque knew he was in trouble. That's right. There was nothing wrong with the female priest. The blonde was wrong. Your sister's blonde hair. It was obvious that Si Thun's tentacles were constantly emitting green, purple and other such lights, causing the vision of others to have a color difference. That's right. That bastard Orgrim was one of the Forsaken? Then what the hell was he looking at? It was obvious that he was looking with the soul fire, so it was all black and white. Well, the main point was that the size and shape of the harmonious thing in his hand was completely wrong. After so many years, how could Duque have gotten the size of Kalia's ball wrong? At this moment, the dignified commander of the Alliance, the true demigod of Azeroth, Duke Marcus's face turned green, and the waterfall of sweat on his back looked like he was about to collapse. Oh my god. Please don't let her wake up at this time. The silly Duque had forgotten that he himself was someone who had stepped into the realm of gods, and he was fighting against the few true gods of Azeroth. He didn't even believe in himself, so who could save him? Her raised eyebrows moved, and her fair face was already full of crimson. Duque's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, it's over. For a moment, Duque almost wanted to use amnesia magic, physics, on her. Right. Just give her a hard punch in the head. Fainting would be good and giving her a concussion would be even better. Unfortunately, when Duque saw that gentle and pleasing face that was like that of a girl next door, he couldn't bear to do it no matter what. What he feared the most was that the air suddenly became quiet. The two of them maintained this posture for a full 5 seconds, and then she just woke up. Duque released his claws as if he had been electrocuted. With a sanctimonious expression, he looked like an upright and reliable young gentleman. Sally, you're awake? Are you okay? That's right, Duque made a big mistake. The first to be swallowed was Sally, not his Kalia. Well, the above was all the main point. The main point was that after Sally took the extreme nature potion, her lower body was quite slippery. See, Thun did a lot of things that slime monsters like to do. Sally's face instantly turned as red as a steamed red prawn. She stammered and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, Sir Marcus. May I ask if you have spare clothes? It would be even better if you have equipment." Yes, yes, yes. While Duque was doing his business, summoning Saffron to attack Thun's weak points everywhere, he rummaged through his storage space that was like a doghouse. Why was it all women's equipment like quicksand robe and insight magic robe? Never mind, I'll give Sally a set first. Then Sally half sat, picked it up, and her face turned red. She said in a mosquito-like voice, "Excuse me, do you have any other rape?" Duque slapped his forehead. "It's over. This is a big misunderstanding. These two robes were famous for being sexy in Azeroth. The biggest selling point was the high slit that reached the waist. Now that he didn't rape her, he just asked her to wear any magic robe. Wouldn't he be asking her to go to the battlefield with a gap?" Although the upright and reliable young gentleman Dumuk silently praised it in his heart, he always felt that the girl was at a disadvantage. Gritting his teeth, Duque finally took out an indescribable item. At this time, Sally's hand trembled as she took it. "Nothing else?" "Nothing else." Dumuk lowered his head, like a student being scolded by a fierce teacher. "Of course not. Originally, it was something that Duque prepared to deceive Jaina and test the flow of magic between different people." "What? Can you carry it over?" "Okay." Duque was as obedient as a grandson. Just as there was a rustling sound behind him, the ceiling of this stinky space suddenly opened again, and a figure covered in golden light suddenly fell down. "Boss, are you okay?" The first half of the sentence was extremely loud, and the person who came was Gavin Rad. Then the second half of the sentence went astray. "Even in this place you still don't forget about the girl." "Okay, as expected of the boss." At this moment, Duque couldn't bear it anymore. Amnesia physical. A 40-meter-long ice sword appeared in Azeroth. Chapter 1354. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? In his dizziness, Gavin Raid naturally thought of the legendary 3 questions of philosophy. Suddenly, a thunderous roar sounded in the turbid air. "Gavin Rad, don't just stand there. Attack Thun's stomach wall with all your might." With that, Duque slapped the back of Gavin Rad's head as if trying to wake him up. But Gavin Rad felt even more dizzy. "Boss, why do I feel like you were the one who hit me hard just now?" Gavin Rad recalled as he slashed at the stomach wall next to him with the wind sword and added a hammer of wrath. "How is that possible?" Duque argued. "It was you who didn't dodge Thun's tentacle before coming down." "There are tentacles in the stomach too?" "Yes. I just destroyed one." "How can we understand the physiological structure of a true god-level monster?" Dr. Du said confidently. "I've read a lot of books, I won't lie to you." "Who was the first to come down?" "Sally Whitemane. She couldn't take it and left." Duque was telling the truth. In this life, Thun's stomach structure was different from that in the game. It was a very interesting stomach part. It was a thing the size of a stool and looked like a meatball. As long as one gave that thing a hard punch, Thun's stomach would twitch violently and vomit out the person who beat the meatball. "I see." Gavin Rad sighed. "Don't think too much. The time in the stomach is limited. Go all out." As Duque spoke, he squeezed his magic circuit and released as much magic power as possible, bombarding any tentacle that dared to emerge from Thun's stomach. On the outside, Duque was an awesome demigod. Although Duque could last longer than mortals in Thun's stomach and used an ice shield to resist the corrosion of the natural elements, the magic net was cut off. Duque could only rely on his magic circuit, which was far superior to a Breaking Dawn mage but far inferior to a true god, to produce magic power. Soon, when the Oxhead Chief Cain fell down, Duque couldn't hold on any longer. He had no choice. He had wasted too much time trying to save Sally. Before Duque left, he left behind a magic orb. As long as it was not destroyed, the ice elements released from it could at least act as a shield and air filter, allowing the people inside to last longer. Blarg! Under the violent attack of the tender flesh, Thun also vomited Duque out. After watching Duque leave, Gavin Rad heaved a heavy sigh and muttered to himself, "Damn, luckily I was smart enough to pretend to forget. Otherwise I might have been killed this time." "What?" Cain turned around abruptly. "No, I'm fine." Gavin Rad decided to keep this matter to himself. The incident in his stomach was destined to be an episode that no one would ever mention again. On the other side, Sal was surprised to see Duque bounce out of Thun's incense burner body as if he had jumped out of a stone. Duque, you were just swallowed? No wonder the great chief was shocked. When Duque wasn't around, the songs and dances were still being sung and danced. No, it should be said that under the control of several elemental emissaries, more epic weapons were smashed out. Now, there were almost no small tentacles on the scene, whether it was claws or eyeball tentacles. Basically, as soon as the small tentacles came out, they were instantly killed by the weapons thrown out by the Wheel of Victory system. The mortal heroes were able to focus more on dealing with the giant claws and eyeball tentacles. In theory, the scales of victory should be tilted towards the Allied forces. But this was not the case. Because in the outer circle of the battlefield, a terrifying fog of death had accumulated. They couldn't figure out what it was, but they could confirm that it wasn't just pure elemental damage. It was more like a combination of crazy will and some kind of terrifying curse. Nozdormu, who was the most unafraid of death, swept his tail made of sand in. It was fine if his tail suddenly broke midway. At first, the broken tail was like a broken lizard's tail, twisting and jumping on its own. After a few breaths, it turned into a sand monster the size of a minotaur with an unknown number of limbs. A kind of chaotic will and power that had never been seen before forcibly took away Nozdormu's control of the sand, which then mutated and created a new unknown type of monster. These monsters were extremely fierce. They fiercely rushed forward and attacked the Alliance and Horde powerhouses. In just one encounter, 2 of the forgotten powerhouses were directly killed, and even their corpses were devoured. Even a strong person like Orgrim's left arm was broken. Fortunately, the undead didn't feel pain. After using dark healing, he could barely move his left arm. Considering that no one had the energy to disperse such a large-scale, tentatively called poisonous fog, the entire battlefield suddenly became crowded. From the initial radius of a large space of 1,000 meters, it quickly shrank to less than 800 meters. Obviously, the speed of shrinking was still increasing. It could be foreseen that in at most 5 minutes, the 4 dragon aspects would completely lose the space to move. Duque, do you have any ideas? Alexstrasza shouted to Duque in the dragon's mental network. Our people will hit C-Thun's stomach. Theoretically, after a certain extent, C-Thun will fall into a short period of weakness. Then we'll go all out? Okay. But I hope that Onyxia will come too. As soon as the Red Dragon Queen's voice fell, 2 voices of opposition immediately appeared in the network. She's not qualified. She can't do it. The first voice was Malago's and the second was Nozdormu's. Obviously, Isra chose to be neutral. Alexstrasza seemed to be in a difficult position. As hardcore members of the Pantheon, the dragons had always fulfilled the duty given to them by the Titans, which was to protect planet Azeroth. They couldn't ignore the disturbance of the ancient gods. However, these ancient gods were existences that even the Titans couldn't deal with back then. In her opinion, the only way to destroy C-Thun's body and seal it again was to gather the 5 great dragon aspects in the Great Formation. Now that Malygos was holding them back, Onyxia could tell at a glance that she didn't have the will and confidence. Alexstrasza felt a headache coming on. At this time, Duque suddenly said, "Onyxia, go. This is for me." Okay. The Black Dragon Princess immediately became decisive. It wasn't an order not being forced. Duque's words, "for me," could make this once cunning Black Dragon become brave? The Red Dragon Queen glanced at Duque with curiosity. Malygos didn't let it go. "You'll replenish the insufficient energy?" "Yes. I'll replenish it." Chapter 1355. This is the dragon race's secret. Malygos' voice in the spiritual network was as firm as stone. "I'm only responsible for providing energy. As for how it's used, that's Onyxia's business." That was what Duque said. In fact, for a guy of Duque's level, just from the changes in energy transmission and observing the dragon race's magic array, he could see many things. Not to mention that Duque had a killer weapon, the System Elf. Now the dragon race had fallen into a vicious circle. If they wanted to exert the greatest power, they had to use the black dragons who had once betrayed them. Only by joining the Guardians of the Earth could the Pentashade dragon race be considered complete and exert the power of various high-end magic arrays to the extreme. Here came the main point. Ever since Nethario, the Wing of Death, was tempted by the ancient god Enzoth, the entire black dragon race had become the target of corrosion. Even every young dragon that had just hatched from the dragon egg would be affected by the ancient god. Onyxia was the only exception. Although she was also born after the fall of Deathwing, firstly she was a direct descendant of Nethario, so her vitality and will were stronger. Secondly, she was subdued by Duque when she was on the brink of death at 1% HP. In that extreme situation, even Enzoth had given up on her. In the end, Duque picked up a big bargain and got rid of Enzatha's will and soul corrosion hidden in her. During Alexstrasza's visit, she had even touched Onyxia herself to confirm this. It could be said that Onyxia was now the only black dragon that the Dragon Sleeping Temple could ally with, and the only black dragon that was qualified to be allied with. By the way, a certain black dragon prince who was also quite famous in history was still just an egg. Or maybe not even an egg. Because Deathwing died early, perhaps the poor guy known as the black-bellied Ratio would no longer have a chance to appear in this life. Speaking of which, since there was no choice, there would not be too much psychological burden. After Alexstrasza promised that if it didn't work, she would turn it into the Four Dragons formation, Malygos finally expressed his acquiescence with silence. After leaving the dragon race's spiritual network, Duque immediately looked at the data in the system prompt. In C. Thun's stomach, he left not only an ordinary oxygen mask and a natural resistance shield, but also a small surveillance circle. It could monitor the condition of the tentacles in C. Thun's stomach. In theory, if history didn't trick him, C. Thun would enter a period of weakness after all the tentacles were knocked out. It was a rare opportunity to focus all their firepower. Any attack that hit C. Thun's body would cause more than double the damage. The timing was not easy to grasp. First of all, the scene must not be too chaotic. If the scene was too chaotic, it would be easy for a murder case to occur. If they could not even keep their lives, how could they talk about focusing fire? Secondly, it was to pick a time when C. Thun's previous batch of giant tentacles had been killed and the new giant tentacles had yet to appear. Finally, he had to dodge C. Thun's ultimate move. Its kinetic death ray could instantly kill anyone it saw. Even Nozdormu, who was known to have the thickest skin, did not dare to take it head-on. Almost at the same second that Duque finished thinking, most people suddenly heard C. Thun's murmur. "You will die. Your heart is about to explode." This evil god's voice went straight to the heart, and almost every mortal hero was in a trance. The warriors and paladins in heavy armor were fine. They were not fast to begin with. For rogues who were most concerned about speed, this was simply fatal. Just then, a giant eye tentacle broke through the ground and rose from the ground with a crackling sound. As rogues, they needed to find a way to break the giant eye tentacles. Eye beam. This kind of chain lightning ray would constantly jump on everyone's body. Every time it jumped, the damage would double. Basically, the third person would die. This state of confusion immediately caused the team to lose members. 3 melee players actually chose the same target. All of this could have been avoided. At most, the moment they discovered it, the 2 furthest would just roll away. However, the ancient god's mental attack directly caused everyone to enter a state of soul paralysis. At that moment, Gavinrad's face turned pale and he immediately activated his invincibility. Vanessa, who was the second to be attacked, immediately activated her shadow cloak. Although she was not immune to the ancient god's damage, it greatly reduced the damage she needed to take. The third one seemed to be a chieftain of the Forsaken. When the highly concentrated eye edge hit him, the people around him were shocked to find that his entire body had turned green. His body, which was no longer decaying because of the shadow power, suddenly turned into a human figure that seemed to be made of green algae. The next second, his entire body scattered on the ground like quicksand. Only the sound of epic-grade equipment clashing against the gravel could be heard. On the other side, Grom was also hit. He, who always fought first in every battle, became the target of the giant claw's tentacles in a brief pause. The huge tentacles wrapped around his entire body, trying to grind him to pieces. This furious attack could be said to have used up all of Grom's strength and courage. At this moment, he was almost standing in the same position as what Oro had said. If the giant claw's tentacles were a few centimeters deeper, Orgrimmar would lose a living legend the next day. Tentacles were soft structures and did not have joints, but because the giant claw's tentacles had a hard claw-like structure, it had joint-like joints. Grom was betting on whether there were strong muscles there. If he did not make the right bet, I've lived enough. Master Howl said to himself in his heart. Living enough did not mean giving up. He used his remaining right hand to grip the handle of the axe tightly, and with a sudden knee strike, he hit the joint of the giant claw. Crack. An armor of Mount Hygel's level was indeed extraordinary. The leg armor violently hit the giant claw's hard shell full of barbs. Fortunately, his knee was not pierced into a sieve because he used the warrior's unique Fury attack, which even produced an effect similar to Thunder Strike. This gave him a precious opportunity. Even if it was only for a short moment, Bloodhowl perfectly hit the joint of the hard shell on the tentacles. The sharp axe blade easily cut through the thick tentacles as if it was cutting through butter. It was a pity that when he jumped down he did not pay attention to his feet. Although the heavy boots had thick metal soles, this could not stop a hard claw from piercing through the soles and into the surface of his foot. He felt that the entire sole of his foot was completely pierced, and the pain was so great that he was twitching. Even when he pulled his foot out as fast as he could, Theon's holy light flash was still quickly applied to his head. He still knew that for a long time he would not be able to use his signature jumping slash. At this moment, he suddenly saw the eyeballs in Si Thun's huge purple eyes begin to bulge. Everyone be careful, Si Thun is about to use Dark Flash. Chapter 1356. It seemed that Si Thun had also realized that fighting the wyverns was too much of a loss, and the combat power of the mortal heroes was unexpected. The mortals that it didn't pay attention to stopped its tentacles from harassing the four dragon aspects. Si Thun would definitely change this. More giant claws and tentacles emerged from the ground, and all kinds of tentacles entangled every existence that dared to resist its authority in their own way, regardless of whether they were small or not. Although the situation hadn't exceeded Duke's understanding of Si Thun, Duke knew that the so-called strategy could be thrown into the toilet and washed away. The number of tentacles was completely wrong, like King Forest. The most exaggerated thing was that the natural elemental magic in the surrounding air had increased exponentially. In contrast, the three most traditional elements of ice, fire, and arcane magic in the Pharaoh were repelled to the greatest extent. Si Thun was crushing all of the Pharaoh, including Maligos and Duke, with his true god-level power. This was its lair, and it was in charge of what kind of place it was. Maligos was furious. This meant that if he wanted to play magic he would have to downgrade to the Breaking Dawn level. This was absolutely humiliating for him, who claimed to be the only ruler of the magic world. He immediately made a decision to give up the magic he was best at and instead pounced on Si Thun, biting and chopping off every tentacle that belonged to Si Thun. Not far away, Duke could clearly feel that at this moment, the laws of magic that all mages were familiar with were being forcibly distorted, leaving him in fear. Si Thun's chaotic and violent power was descending, and its irresistible power was dominating and taking over everything. Duke could hear the sound of the magic net collapsing in this area. The shattering sound in the soul's vision was even more unsettling and frightening than the earth-shattering roars in reality. Moreover, the magic net was the main part of Duke's main city as a god. The collapse of this part of the magic net was tantamount to cutting off at least 30% of Duke's strength in one go. Si Thun was very shrewd. Duke's face fell. A dragon aspect was still a dragon without magic. He was a demigod of magic who had ascended as a human. Could he really transform into the white-robed sword Saint Gandalf and stab him with the spiral sword? In the past, Duke had backstabbed so many strong enemies and it was always successful because most of those enemies had something like the heart, a so-called vital point. Si Thun, the monster evil god, didn't have such a thing. The only way to kill it was to forcefully cut off its life force and beat it into a pile of shit. Duke's spiral sword was really not useful here. There was no such thing as an absolutely powerful profession in this world. Since his mystic level was suppressed, Duke had to find another way out. Master? Duke. What should we do? Please give us your instructions. Duke and the other elemental emissaries anxiously asked Duke through the soul connection. They were existences that used the elements as their life forms. If they lost the supply of elemental magic power, not only would their strength be greatly reduced, but they would also face the risk of their souls being annihilated. Duke said, "All of you return to the weave outside. Inject as much magic power as you can into my body before the weave here collapses. Take care." Alonce's fail seemed to want to persuade Duke, but in the end he could only say these two words. In the center of his field of vision, the huge eye of Si Thun was swelling more and more. The system prompt, "A high-energy attack is about to strike," was flashing non-stop. Everyone could see that Dark Flash was about to be released. Because there were too many tentacles, the scene was very chaotic. There were still people fighting the most threatening eyeball tentacles, but there were at least 3 more giant claw tentacles with stronger life force near the eye of Si Thun. The cruel giant claw tentacles twitched instinctively, attacking every living thing that passed by, and hitting something similar to the warrior profession's tendon break. This was a skill with a strong deceleration effect. In front of the world-destroying Dark Flash, this was undoubtedly the most vicious curse of death. They couldn't run, because they would have to watch helplessly as the crimson light that symbolized death swallowed them up. It wasn't just one person who was hit, but a total of 7. Magni could rely on Avatar, and Theon could use his invincibility to get rid of this damn debuff, but the remaining 5 couldn't escape no matter what. Ox Chief Kane, Grandpa Howl, Hadron Brightwing, Benedict, and Thrall. Dark Flash began to shoot. Death rays as thick as the diameter of its eyeball surged out and hit the ground heavily. Countless insects crawled out of the gravel-filled ground and fled in all directions. Stones of all sizes spun strangely on the ground and danced in fear. Some tiny grains of sand even bounced up from the violent tremors and flew into the air. They first melted into glass under the ultra-high temperature, then turned into terrifying nothingness along with the insects that couldn't escape in time when the crimson destructive rays touched them. Kane's muscles bulged as he roared, trying to use brute force to resist the short-term deceleration effect of tendon break. With a smile on his face, Grom silently took over Magni's position, using his remaining arm to lift the tomahawk and block a giant claw tentacle. However, apart from them, everyone seemed to have accepted their impending fate. No matter what Benedict had in mind at this moment, he was a benevolent elder, continuing his treatment. After realizing that he had no chance to escape, Hadron stopped moving. He stood still and shot arrow after arrow. Thrall didn't act like a great chief at all. Instead, he acted like a pure warrior, madly slashing the tentacles in front of him. That's right. He was an orc first, then a warrior, and finally a great chief. An orc warrior, even if he knew he was going to die, he had to die on the way. No, many tribal masters let out shrill cries, but their feet didn't stop. They could only instinctively follow the established tactics and run around Thun to avoid the invincible power of Dark Flash. They twisted their heads and stared at where Thrall was. For a moment, Woken's heart stopped beating. As Thrall's chief advisor, as a firm supporter of the tribe, Woken never hesitated to use the greatest malice to suspect and speculate on those who were against the tribe or once had a grudge against the tribe. Now, what he was most worried about had happened. In front of him was a great opportunity for the Alliance to weaken the tribe. This was a coalition army formed to fight against the ancient evil gods, and it was also a war where the weak gathered to challenge the strong. If there were any casualties in such a difficult battle, it would be normal. Chapter 1357. The strength of the Alliance and the Horde was already disproportionate. Wajin couldn't imagine how much cohesion the Horde would have if they lost Grom, Kane, and Sal. Maybe the Horde would not be destroyed and maybe there would be new Horde heroes to lead the Horde. In any case, the decline of the Horde would be inevitable. If there was another big incident like the attack of the Swarm, maybe the Horde would have to join the Alliance again. The orcs in the old Horde had to wear slave collars because they were defeated. This time, the warriors of the Horde might have to wear slave collars themselves because they begged for the reproduction of the race. Perhaps the higher-ups of the Alliance would proclaim that this was an amalgamation of the races, or perhaps a wise leader like Duke would play down the past grudges and not wear any humiliating marks on the Horde. But to the warriors of the Horde, this decision itself was like a slave collar. Suffocation, terror, uneasiness, all kinds of negative emotions surged into Wajin's heart. Heroes could not be replicated. If Duke really had a way to not use it, Wajin didn't dare to imagine it anymore. The first landing point of the Dark Flash was far away from Duke. According to Thun's current rhythm of sweeping 180 degrees clockwise in a semicircle, Duke only needed to lift his legs and run 2 steps to reach the safe zone. The shock of the Horde's powerhouses fell into Duke's eyes. He didn't say a word and watched this scene coldly. Duke knew that as the biggest core of the Alliance's formation, his every move would be a signal. It could even be said that if he ordered to clean up the Horde first, except for a few upright people like Tyrion Fordring, most of the Alliance's powerhouses would be happy to immediately turn around and eliminate the unstable factor of the Horde first. Even if the Alliance and the Horde had cooperated for the 3rd time in the Battle of Calamity, Mount Hyjal, and the Battle of the Swarm, presumably no one would forget the hatred between the Alliance and the Horde. Even if it was a tragedy caused by drinking demon blood by mistake and maliciously led by people with ill intentions, having a reason to forgive did not mean that it would definitely be forgiven. However, at this moment, Duque had a feeling of being in a trance. It was the feeling of standing at the crossroads of history and controlling fate. There had never been such a clear feeling of one person controlling the fate of millions of people from the 2 major forces, or even all the living beings on planet Azeroth. Perhaps it would be more beneficial for the Alliance to let Sal die here and let the tribe become a pile of loose sand. The Alliance that had swallowed up the Horde might be even more focused on fighting against the Burning Legion and the ancient gods. Perhaps this was what Duque as a human should do. However, at this time Duque felt that it was pointless to do so. Wasn't the world of Azeroth exciting precisely because of the war epics written by heroes? Wasn't it precisely because of the strategy of inclusiveness that there were hundreds of races gathered together, regardless of race, occupation, age, or gender? What if he did? Wouldn't that be going against the flow of the world? Duque suddenly laughed because he suddenly remembered his original identity, an insignificant citizen of the Celestial Empire. Since such a large Celestial Empire could be inclusive of 56 races, why couldn't the leader of a small alliance with only tens of millions of people do the same? Duque walked towards the safe zone according to the prearranged tactics. For some reason in the eyes of others, Duque did not take a step back. The power of fairness and love nurtured in Duque's heart seemed to erupt at this moment, forming a towering flag in the illusory spiritual world. Duque made his move. Even though his strength had temporarily fallen to the Breaking Dawn level because of C. Thun's forceful removal of the weave and other elements, he was still a well-deserved expert here. A longbow made of pure holy light suddenly appeared in his hand. Queen Sylvanas looked at it in surprise because the shape of this bow was the bow she and Duque had used to shoot arrows together when the cataclysm invaded the Well of the Sun. The slender and sharp spiral sword turned into the sharpest arrow and was knocked on the bowstring. Every move of Duque's was very fast, but every ranger, including Queen Sylvanas, felt very awkward when they saw it. After all, Duque did not know how to shoot arrows. He was purely copying Queen Sylvanas' posture when she shot the arrow that day purely from memory. Although it was elegant and efficient for a female elf to use such a posture, if it was a rough man, it would be a little too horrible to look at. The posture was not the main point. The main point was that Duque could actually forcibly grasp the knack of archery through imitation. The bowstring vibrated. The next moment, an arrow suddenly appeared beside the giant claw that Grom and Sar were fighting with. The golden arrow perfectly pierced through the gap in the shell of the giant claw. The golden arrow tore through flesh and blood, and the stinky liquid split the black void like a line, and then turned into a bloody mist. After the golden spiral arrow, or rather the spiral sword, shot through the huge tentacle before the terrifying light of dark flash touched it, it made the smallest 180-degree turn in the air. Then, under the guidance of Duque's power, it flew back along the periphery of C. Thun's body in an arc. The 5 trapped people couldn't help but have a thought. When did the Alliance have a god of archery? Before they could think too much, Queen Sylvanas had personally demonstrated and shot the second arrow. This time, Queen Sylvanas had used all her strength to shoot the arrow, aiming at it. Originally, Queen Sylvanas' attack alone was not enough. At the critical moment, a claw popped out from the Emerald Dream and fiercely added another hit. The giant claw that wrapped around Cain fell 1 second later. Go! Duque's stern voice came from afar. You make it sound so easy. Grom complained, which was rare for him. That's right. How'd it go? The 5 of them still had at least 3 seconds of broken tendon, but C. Thun's ultimate skill only needed 1 second at most. At this moment, they were pleasantly surprised to find that the ground under their feet had turned into ice. The next moment, the ice suddenly bounced up obliquely. They were like marbles bounced off a spring, and their whole bodies flew out of the safe zone. The powerhouses on both sides caught the 5 who were bounced off. Hadgeron! Queen Sylvanas shouted. Great Chief? Woken was extremely surprised. Duque's action showed his attitude. Not only would he not give up Hadgeron and Benedettas, the 2 seemingly second-tier heroes in the Alliance, but he even intended to save Sar, the 3 core figures of the Horde. Not only the Alliance but even the powerhouses of the Horde felt the power of Duque's will. Magni, who passed by Duque, sighed slightly. His nose actually felt sour. Chapter 1358. This was the faith that mortals had towards the light. The young man named Duque, his country, and his companions had unknowingly surpassed Thoradin the Great, who had been revered as a saint for 2,800 years because he had teamed up with the High Elves to expel the Trolls. He had walked to the forefront of the era. Magni sighed. If the many living beings in Azeroth could survive, perhaps the name Duke Marcus would become an eternal legend. William happened to be running near Magni and suddenly asked, Uncle Magni, can I really become a great leader like Uncle Marcus in the future? Magni laughed. In his God's Descent state, he ran with big strides and laughed heartily. Silly boy. There is only one Duke Marcus and there is only one William Rin. Moreover, mortals are mortals and gods are gods. Before you have the ability to step into the divine realm, why do you care so much? You're just asking for trouble. William was stunned. Suddenly, the confusion that had been stuck in his heart for a long time was solved. Yes, every existence in the world was unique. No one would be a degraded copy of another. William was William. As long as he did his best and had a clear conscience, it would be fine. Moreover, if the gap was too big, he would lose the heart to catch up. Mortals were destined to look up to the divine realm. On the other side, Thrall, who had been saved, looked at Duque with an incomparably complicated expression. Logically speaking, he should hate Duque. It was precisely because of this man's incomparably outstanding and even era-transcending wisdom that led to the defeat of the old tribe and caused hundreds of thousands of orcs to become slaves. He, who hadn't personally participated in the Battle of the Dark Portal and World War II, could shout, "Orcs will never be slaves," without hesitation. This heroic statement might be praised by the tribe for thousands of years, but he couldn't say half a sentence like, "Duque, I hate you." Resentment? Perhaps. But at this moment there was more admiration. While running, Thrall's mouth that was full of fangs squirmed for a long time before he asked, "Why? Do you think it's because we are true allies? Did we swear to protect each other? Or do you mean that I'm a good person, a great saint?" Duque smiled. "Neither." Thrall suddenly gritted his teeth. "Orgrim told me. You had personally ordered assassins to assassinate me when I was still a baby. He's just a weak baby." For a moment, the experts on both sides almost suspected that Sal was going to fight with Duque. Duque's tone changed and his words became sonorous. "I never intended to deny it. At that time, a completely destroyed tribe was more beneficial to the Alliance. If I was in power at that time, I would have slaughtered all the captives of the tribe, just like how the tribe slaughtered all the civilians in every human village in the Elven Forest." The air suddenly froze. Sal did not know how to continue. At this moment, Duque's facial muscles suddenly softened. But that's all in the past. The current relationship between the Alliance and the Horde had nothing to do with justice, pity, or hatred. Allies? The benevolence of a saint? Sorry, of course I won't say such superficial words. If you have to ask me for an answer, I will tell you that this is the need of the world. The need of the world. Sal was a little confused. Don't worry. If I choose to attack the Horde one day, it will be because the conflict between the Alliance and the Horde cannot be reconciled, and I will do it at least 3 days after the Horde receives the official declaration of war. Perhaps one day in the future I will kill you and perhaps you will kill me. In this world where even the Titans, who are known as gods, can fall, nothing is immortal. Duque's words were shocking. Not only Sal, but all the experts of the Alliance and the Horde around him lost the ability to speak. Please remember, you and I may fight each other and die a violent death. The forces you and I represent may tear up the Alliance and become enemies. But not today. Yes, not yesterday. Maybe tomorrow. But not today. Not today. This sentence itself contained a mysterious attitude. An attitude that could make both sides feel relieved. Maybe tomorrow they would become mortal enemies again, but not today. Maybe tomorrow they would perish, but not today. There might be a lot of bad luck and misfortune in the future, but definitely not today. Today was destined to be a memorable day for mortals. Because today would be a great victory day for mortals and demigods. Because today would be the day of victory for the allied forces of many races to overthrow the dark ancient evil god Thun. Sarl laughed loudly and waved the burning hammer of destruction. "Ah, Duke Marcus, I admire you, let's go together. Kill this disgusting guy." Duque also smiled and waved the spinning golden sword in his hand. "Ha, Sal, I also admire you and I used to want to kill you." But not only Sal and Duque, but even the experts of the Alliance and the Horde who heard the conversation between the two big shots shouted in unison. Not today, when Thun's dark flash drew a 180-degree arc and stopped helplessly without any success. The experts of the Alliance and the Horde burst out with the greatest enthusiasm and combat power, bravely pouncing on their targets. The space that could be moved around shrank once again. The 4 dragon aspects and a slightly smaller black dragon with Thun as the center occupied an average of 5 directions. Duque's words were also heard by the 4 dragon aspects. Alexstrasza and Isra nodded at Duque. They agreed with his words. Nosdormu was deep in thought, only Malygos was still unhappy. Perhaps in the future, it will be difficult for so many dragon aspects to gather together to deal with the ultimate evil. Regardless of whether we have conflicts with each other, I still want to say, not today. Yes, today was a day to work together. Tomorrow's conflicts would be dealt with tomorrow. Malygos spat fiercely and finally nodded at Alexstrasza. Every battlefield in the hall was ignored by the dragons and Duque, and all the tentacles were left to the mortals to deal with. Only the heads of the dragons were left. The dragon's head was ferocious and uneven, the dragon's eyes emitted a blazing light, and the fangs that were slightly exposed were glowing fiercely. The entire dragon's mental network was dead silent, as if the world had come to a standstill at this moment. It made others hallucinate as if these huge dragons were just sculptures or decorations. All the distracting thoughts eventually returned to nothingness, and the soft breathing sound of the dragons spread like ripples. Unknowingly, every dragon's breath came together. The same frequency, the same weight. Chapter 1359. A bolt of lightning zigzagged across the dark hemispherical space, and the dark void suddenly boiled like porridge. A five-colored spot of light suddenly appeared 100 meters above the eye of sea, Thun. Like a falling stone hitting the mirror-like surface of a lake, a circle of ripples appeared in the air, and the five-colored circle spread out to a radius of at least 500 meters. Even the poisonous circle summoned by Sea Thun was forced to retreat. A soft woo-woo sound was heard. This is... Kalia's voice was a little cautious. I know. It's the Dragon Clan's formation, right? Jaina was a little excited as she watched this scene happen. Every powerhouse in the fierce battle noticed the changes above their heads. Their movements were a little distorted due to excitement, and most of them took the time to look up, but they had to retract their gaze and focus on the battle. Not everyone had the spare time to appreciate the huge shadow that gradually emerged from the five-colored circle of light. It was a majestic palace. It was silver-white, inlaid with gold-edged carvings everywhere, with complex and thick Greek-style columns, and a holy palace covered with snow. However, this temple was upside down. It was as if it formed a mirror image of Sea Thun on the ground. When everyone saw the towering temple gradually transforming from a shadow to reality, and saw those translucent illusory ancient dragons wandering around the inverted temple, they finally realized what kind of palace it was. It's the Dragon Slumber Temple. The dragon aspect actually summoned the Dragon Slumber Temple. The sudden appearance of the strange temple finally affected the entire battlefield, and even Sea Thun could not help but turn his huge eyes to stare at the uninvited guest that suddenly broke in from mid-air. More and more colors of light flickered in the dark void, like the light of stars twinkling. Every time a five-colored light flashed, a mighty and majestic dragon with shining scales was left behind. Red dragon, blue dragon, green dragon, bronze dragon, and even the legendary black dragon that had left the Dragon Slumber Temple. These illusory dragon projections pushed aside Sea Thun's poisonous fog and completely spread out over the dark hemispherical space with a radius of 1,000 meters. After the light flickered, a vast sea of dragons appeared in the sky. Every dragon was glowing with holy light. It even seemed like a titan in the pantheon was standing at a higher place among the dragons, looking at the twisted and hideous Sea Thun with a majestic gaze. The battlefield was silent for a moment. In the next moment, a clear and melodious dragon roar resounded throughout this dark underground world. In the north, the Red Dragon Queen raised her head high and spoke in Draconic. In the name of the Titans of the Pantheon, I, Alexstrasza, swear to lead the Red Dragon race to protect the purity of life on planet Azeroth. The alarm in Sea Thun's heart rang. In just a moment of daze, it discovered that it had lost control of part of the corrosive evil divine power around it. His connection with the divine powers had been severed. Originally, he relied on the corrosion star soul to forcefully extract the life force of the planet, allowing him to become an existence that even the Pantheon Hall couldn't deal with. At this moment, it found that its control area in the crust was invaded by a ball of green flames. It was clearly like a ball of raging flames, but it allowed the underground space that had been exhausted due to its excessive extraction of power to show life again. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The entire depths of the crust swayed gently. Then Malygos, Nosdormu, and Isra made their oaths one after another. Under the witness of the sleeping dragon temple, each oath would deepen the bond between the dragon aspect and the planet, making it stronger and more able to evoke the resonance of the will of planet Azeroth. It could be said that the Guardian Oath was the source of the dragon aspect's power. Malygos mobilized the elements of this world. Nosdormu consolidated the time and space lines of the planet. Isra eliminated the evil dreams, wills, as much as possible. Under the witness of the sleeping dragon temple, each oath would deepen the bond between the dragon aspect and the planet, making it stronger and more able to evoke the resonance of the will of planet Azeroth. It could be said that the Guardian Oath was the source of the dragon aspect's power. At this time, it was Onyxia's turn. If she had a choice, Alexstrasza did not want to put this weak-willed junior last. That was because the pressure on her was the greatest at the beginning and the end. It couldn't be helped. The will of the planet started with living beings and ended with the Earth as the carrier. Who asked the original Nesario to be so powerful? The father had fallen, and the daughter had turned from a traitor to a loyal subject. How strong could her will be? There was no way to fake it in front of the will of the planet, so Onyxia's oath sounded very spineless. In the name of the prophet of my lord's fate, the demigod of the Azeroth weave, Duke Marcus, I, Onyxia, am a dragon that obeys the will of my lord. In accordance with the guardian will of my lord, I will protect the land of Azeroth. Wait. Very weak. You're so weak, aren't you? She did not have her own will at all. Even in her declaration, she only claimed that she was a pure thug. What she meant was, I'm just a worker. Don't look for me if there's nothing important. Even if the sky falls, my lord will hold it up. Alexstrasza and Isra rolled their eyes when they heard this. The other two didn't look happy. Nosdormu bared his teeth and Maligos spat. Onyxia ignored them all and pretended not to hear. Anyway, protecting the world has nothing to do with me. I'm just a slacker. I'm forced to be a mount because I want to live. I'm being ridden day and night because I want to live. If the side of justice is the victor, I don't mind being the messenger of justice. Her oath was weak, so the response given by the will of the planet was naturally weak. It was on a completely different level from the previous four dragon aspects. If Duque had not held the line at the end, the Red Dragon Queen would probably have announced the change to the four-dragon formation. Duque stood at the junction of Onyxia's neck and back. His feet seemed to have grown roots as he stood firmly on the shiny black dragon scales. The cloak behind him fluttered even though there was no wind. His tiger lips moved slightly and a clear voice sounded. I, Duke Marcus, hereby swear, I don't care who you are and I don't care what you want to do. Whether it's the Supreme Demon King or the evil ancient god that has taken root on the planet. Since you're in Azeroth, you have to listen to the rules of Azeroth. Or get lost. Or die. The simple and violent oath caused the shadows of the entire dragon's slumber temple to buzz. Then the oath became an echo, circulating again and again in the vibration of the laws, becoming louder and louder. First, it resounded through the entire Karaj temple, then Silithus, and finally it seemed to shake through the entire planet of Azeroth. Chapter 1360. Critically ill patients squeezed out abscesses, cut off flesh, and even severed limbs in order to find a chance of survival. It was like a patient with advanced diabetes who knew that his leg had rotted, but was still unwilling to amputate it. This kind of decision was never an easy thing to make. Ever since the ancient gods corroded planet Azeroth, absorbing nutrients at the cost of the planet's destruction in exchange for their own growth, this beautiful planet seemed to have fallen into an endless cycle. If the planet wanted to be healthy, these ancient gods had to be removed. However, removing the ancient gods also meant that planet Azeroth, which had been deeply corroded by the souls and power of the ancient gods, had a high chance of being destroyed. Even Amun-Thul, the boss of the Pantheon, could not make the decision to completely destroy the ancient gods. In the end, he used sealing methods to seal the ancient gods, praying that as time passed, there would be a better way to deal with it. The reason why Duque dared to confront Thun so head-on was because he had provided the planet's will with a solution. When Alexstrasza's life force was injected into Thun's territory in the planet's crust, Thun was completely enraged. The ancient gods had been fighting for territory since tens of thousands of years ago, when there were no historical records, until they were sealed during the War of Domination 25,000 years ago. On the land, on the only continent of ancient Kalimdor, the various proxy races were fighting each other. In the depths of the earth, the forces of each other were constantly clashing. Alexstrasza, with her mere demigod body, rushed in with that little power, and purified the entire territory of Thun, bringing vitality to such a vast area. This was as ridiculous as using a drop of water to purify a large bottle of ink. Thun was really angry. The turbid and evil underground world was like a triggered trap, operating rapidly. From the layers of seemingly ordinary rock formations. From the quiet and peaceful underground river. From the unexpected cracks and holes. Countless forces were used, finally forming an unimaginably huge mass of polymer. If Alexstrasza's power was a pool of pure water, then the huge figure of the evil divine power that gradually emerged was a deep pool that could not be purified. In the crust, there was an incredible landscape everywhere. The infinitely distorted evil will and corrosive slurry constantly mutated in the huge underground space, forming a chaotic landscape of eternal change. It frantically surrounded and suppressed the wisp of green that dared to shoot into the underground world, destroying the only life aura that dared to invade the underground world in the past 25,000 years. Compared to the monster under the Karaj temple, which was called Sea Thun by the Karaj insect people in the insect people language, what the mortal warriors of the Alliance and the Horde saw now was just the tip of the iceberg. At that very moment, in a place deeper than the Earth's crust, in the deepest depths of the Earth, some life seemed to have been awakened. Not only Sea Thun's mind and divine power amalgamated in the Earth's crust, but even the Coalition soldiers far away on the surface clearly felt a chilling anger gushing from the deepest part of the Earth. This is. Alexstrasza was stunned. At first, she didn't understand why Duque wanted her to send 30% of her power into Sea Thun's nest. Now she understood a little. Lava. The magma was hot enough to destroy everything. Every living planet had its own active liquid core, a large part of which was magma. With the movement of the Earth's crust, the planet would always vent the excess energy deep in the Earth's core in the form of volcanic eruptions from time to time. In Azeroth, the most typical place was the Ungoro crater. It happened to be the intersection of the two continental plates. What Duque did was actually to remind the hazy will of the planet that it could make its own eruption slightly deviate, yes. While Alexstrasza was luring Sea Thun's power together, she could directly spew magma from the depths of the Earth's core and annihilate Sea Thun's main force. Now it seemed that this idea was successful. Sea Thun's simple thinking allowed Alexstrasza, with her mere demigod power, to complete a feat similar to using a fishing rod to lift a whale. Hundreds of millions of tons of lava sprayed at high speed onto Sea Thun's divine power polymer in the Earth's crust, and Sea Thun in the Karaj temple suddenly let out a shrill cry. With this as a signal, Theon, who was in his stomach, raised Ashbringer high up and slashed down with all his strength. In the eyes of every hero who was fighting fiercely, Sea Thun's body expanded by at least half its size, lightning flashed in its body, and every eyeball tentacle that squeezed out of the ground randomly released lightning similar to eye-edge. Its huge and hideous and twisted body became astonishingly bright, giving off a strange sense of transparency. At the same time, it gave people a premonition that it would collapse at any time. An ancient god was indeed an ancient god. Sea Thun was indeed a super boss that destroyed countless guilds in the early versions of World of Warcraft. Even though the largest group of divine power in its nest continued to be destroyed, in a situation that was almost equivalent to a human's heart being pierced, it still didn't die immediately. Instead, its ferocity was aroused. A huge tentacle that was twice the size of an ordinary giant claw tentacle drilled out of the ground and fiercely swept its claws at the place where the mortal heroes were the most concentrated. Just lying on the ground, the tentacle was nearly 2 stories high, and it swept over with the momentum that could sweep an entire street with one blow. Such a wide area of indiscriminate attack made all dodging meaningless. The plate armor with higher defense showed its true value at this moment. The paladins and warriors wearing heavy iron cans could at least be hit like flying balls. An undead thief was smashed into pieces the moment it was hit. The other lich's blue and white ice barrier had just lit up when, in the next instant, the high-density ice elemental barrier couldn't withstand the powerful attack, and the entire ice block exploded with a blazing white light before shattering with a loud bang. Not only the ice block but the entire body of the lich along with the ice block shattered into powder-like small pieces, annihilated in this dark underground space. But this was the last victim of the battle of the Karaj temple. It was at this moment that the earth suddenly shook. Apart from Duque and the will of planet Azeroth, no other existence discovered that after the underground magma destroyed the largest mass of divine power of Sea Thun, it once again gathered in a whirlpool in one direction. In the center of the whirlpool, after the dark red light had accumulated to the extreme, it suddenly lit up and burst out with a brilliance that was no less than the sun's rays. With a loud boom, a fiery red pillar of light burst out from the ground where Sea Thun's base was located. This lava spike was like a red-hot fork piercing Sea Thun from the bottom up in the blink of an eye. It was like a kebab with a piece of meat on it held high. Without even half a second of hesitation, the 5-color guardian dragons activated the Dragon Slumber formation, and the illusory dragons injected their own dragon breath into the inverted Dragon Slumber temple. A brilliant 5-colored brilliance suddenly rose from the temple, and from top to bottom, it blasted into Sea Thun's big eyeball. It was an amazing scene that countless mortals would never have the opportunity to see in their lifetime. The dazzling brilliance in the underground cave radiated in all directions, not only dispelling the surrounding darkness, but the brilliance was also like the dawn, washing away the darkness. Even the light penetrated through the thick rock layers, bathing the entire Silithus desert in this light. Hundreds of thousands of coalition soldiers were fortunate enough to witness the last moments of a true evil god. The remains of Si Thun, which had been rushed into the air by the lava fountain, welcomed the final blow of the Lun, the goddess of the moon. A burst of starlight and moonlight flashed. Immediately, the entire disgusting mass of meat began to fall apart like a sandcastle blown away by a gust of wind. Then, in the blink of an eye, an immeasurable amount of power of heaven and earth broke out of Si Thun's body, even tearing his body into pieces, turning it into a bloody mist that filled the sky, dissipating in the almost never-ending desert storm of Silithus. Chapter 1361. I, Duke Marcus in my capacity as the Supreme Commander of the Alliance, declare. I, Sal in my capacity as the Chief of the Horde, declare. Two voices in different languages, simultaneously synchronized in every magic communication channel and broadcast on every magic loudspeaker. The cruel ancient evil god Si Thun has been defeated by the combined forces of the dragons, the Alliance, and the Horde. The moment the two broadcasts stopped, there was a very brief silence, as if a god had come and zipped everyone's mouth, forbidding them from speaking. After a short pause, the gears of time began to turn again. In a flash, loud cheers erupted in every corner of Silithus at the same time. In the emotionless desert, it seemed that every grain of sand was instantly heated up by the enthusiasm of the people, and even the air was boiling. Ah, dead. Dead. Who asked you to show off? What ancient god? To hell with it. Bah. Bastard, can you see it in heaven? I, your father, have avenged you. Who was laughing and celebrating? Who was crying sadly? The news of Si Thun's annihilation spread throughout Silithus in the shortest amount of time, as if it had grown wings. Then, through magic, it spread to Theramore and Orgrimmar, which were thousands of miles away. It crossed the endless sea and reached the Eastern Kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of allied soldiers shouted wildly, their tears and smiles mixed together, but it did not seem out of place at all. The Tauren carried the gnome on his neck as if it was a normal thing. Orcs and humans put their arms around each other's shoulders, trolls and dwarves looked at each other and danced. All the incredible things before the war happened at this moment. When Duque announced that the war was over and that hundreds of tons of wine would be shipped, the atmosphere reached its peak. Duque had long foreseen the fall of Si Thun, and under the premise of meeting the military needs, he secretly prepared a celebration ceremony. When hundreds of portals opened at the various gathering points of Silithus soldiers, when the tavern attendants were transferred over to push barrels of fine wine through the portals and open the barrels, letting the overflowing aroma of wine spread in all directions, not a single warrior could control himself. Don't push. Don't push. Line up. Even the Alliance tribe has a share. With the Holy Knights maintaining order and millions of gold coins opening the way, Thrall, who saw this scene in the magic mirror, was shocked by Duque's generosity. The scorching lava was erupting more than 10 steps away, but under the cover of the large ice base that Duque had constructed with the frost element, not a single bit of heat was transmitted to him. Instead there was a faint chill, giving off a surreal feeling. Sal turned his head. Duque, did you foresee Si Thun's fall long ago? Duque pursed his lips. No. However, I think that at least if we fail and have to wait for death, we can still drink away our sorrows. Humph. I don't believe a single word you're saying now. Duque shrugged. Whether you believe it or not, I believe it myself. He had seen scoundrels before, but he had never seen such a scoundrel. Sal suddenly realized that his cultivation was not enough. Sal scratched his head and was about to say something when Watkins stopped him. As a great chief, once the battle was over, there would be a lot of things to do. At this time, Jaina came over, pulled on Duque's sleeve and said in a voice that sounded like a dream, "Hey Duque, is Si Thun dead?" Duque raised his head, then twisted his slightly sore neck. Since the beginning of human civilization we have always wanted to kill all the rats and cockroaches, but what happened? Jaina's face suddenly turned a little ugly. This result is terrible. Duque, however, shook his head and smiled. You missed a lot of things. From the point of view of the continuation of life, no existence can completely destroy a divine creature that can reproduce infinitely. Then, from the point of view of the gods, although Si Thun is not completely finished, it has completely lost its territory and foundation. In all senses, it is no different from being finished. It has already been eliminated from this multi-party game around planet Azeroth. Forget about reviving and coming back, it's still unknown whether the other ancient gods will let it go. Enzoth, Yogg-Saron, and the others were not good people. In the eyes of mortals, the defeated Si Thun had no value other than contributing equipment. In the eyes of the other ancient gods, See Thun's remaining chaos divinity and divine spark fragments were the greatest treasure trove. Unfortunately, those things were also toxic to Duque, so he could only let those guys take advantage of them. As the greatest reflection of a god's characteristics, divinity had the deepest level of the god's will imprint, and was definitely the most troublesome. Although Duque could purify those divinities, it was extremely not cost-effective. This was like extracting beneficial substances from a pile of feces. In theory there were drops, but who would be willing to extract them? How much effort and energy would be wasted? This was a big problem in itself. As for the divine spark fragment, this thing was the upper limit of divine power that a god could contain. In theory it was also a good thing, but Duque still politely declined it. Because the direction See Thun was going was not in line with Duque's. A small corrosive element in Logia? What the hell was that? Duque did not need those things. What Duque really wanted was... Suddenly, in the underground space that had been blown open, everyone felt an inexplicable throbbing. Whether it was the mortal heroes or the guardian dragons that were supposed to be high and mighty, they all raised their heads one by one. Suddenly, they felt that they had temporarily lost contact with the power that they were familiar with. What was reflected in their vision was a still world. The wind was still, and every grain of dust that was blown by the wind was still in a spinning position. There was neither the agitation of the elements, nor the passage of time. They watched the faint light of the sun pouring down from the hole in the dome, and it was a warm scene. The sudden sense of loss after losing their powers did not bring them panic. The biggest reason was that a sense of tranquility and warmth filled their hearts. That was the feeling of a mother. The next moment time seemed to flow again. Everything in the world seemed to be in high spirits because of the arrival of a will. To be precise, it was not a single will. It was more like an amalgamation of countless wills. Some were living, some were determined to be dead by mortals, and there were also many wills of wandering souls. All the wills gathered together, forming a relatively unified will. At this moment, this will set a sentence in the common language: "Thank you, Duke Marcus." Then this will disappeared without a trace. Phew. Duque let out a long turbid breath. This is what I wanted. Chapter 1362. What kind of existence was a planet's will, or commonly known as a star soul? This was a very general topic and no one could explain it clearly. Duque had read countless ancient books in Karazhan, but there were not many records about the planet's will. Obviously it was not the only case that planet Azeroth had a will. In some cases the planet only had a very vague concept of survival. However, Duque noticed that there were traces of a star soul on a planet that Medivh had personally set foot on. Unfortunately, that star soul had been defeated and perished in the face of the Burning Legion's invasion. The most crucial part of this record was that at the last moment, the star soul had fought for survival, or perhaps it was for the most thorough resistance. It did something that seemed exaggerated but Duque felt was reasonable. The star soul had bet everything on a mortal hero. That guy was like a lottery jackpot, obtaining a full set of luxurious equipment, including 3 middle-grade artifacts in just a week. Then that guy became the Otherworld's version of Long Out Yin, forming an army of 1 million people in a month to fight against the Burning Legion. Unfortunately, it was unknown whether the Star Soul itself was too weak, or that the Otherworld's Long Out Yin was not talented enough. Anyway, after that guy killed 2 high-level Void Lords in one go, Archimonde directly attacked and smashed him into pieces. A vigorous war of resistance also ended with the victory of evil. Planet Azeroth was valued by the Pantheon, and there was definitely a reason why the Titan boss Amon Thul did not hesitate to let those blind ancient gods go to protect planet Azeroth. Perhaps, if Duque had transmigrated a little later, he would have known about this history in the later versions of the game. The problem was that there were no ifs in this world. One day, Duque's brain would run out of information about transmigrators. Then, when faced with an unknown fate, the best choice was to strengthen himself. Duque did not know if the planet's will would reward him for helping planet Azeroth kill See Thun, or how much it would give him. At the very least, it would be good to have a good impression of the planet's will. What if it gets excited or anxious and wants to find some demigod hero to pass on his peerless skills to meet Duque? I don't mind being Du Out Yin. Of course, as a transmigrator and a newly advanced demigod with a brain, Duque would never put all his eggs in one basket. If it really did turn over, it would be a complete loss. There was no need to deliberately curry favor with the will of planet Azeroth. It would be good if there were benefits, but there was nothing to complain about if there were no benefits. After all, the path of the gods was basically a dark path. See Thun and the other ancient gods were so powerful, but didn't they still fall, get sealed and get beaten up? The seemingly omnipotent titans of the Pantheon Palace who claimed to be eternal were also killed to the point where not even their seeds were left. In the original history, the mortal heroes of Azeroth had a final battle with the resurrected Sargeras. It could be foreseen that the resurrected Sargeras would have an almost invincible divine power. This Sargeras would even be at his peak. Blindly focusing on the path of the titans of the Pantheon Palace would not be able to defeat such a Sargeras. Duque pondered for a long time before he figured out a truth. Now, the various powers that the mortal heroes of Azeroth had mastered, such as the anger of the warriors, the energy of the thieves, and the magic of the pharaoh. From another perspective, this was also a microcosm of the laws and territories mastered by the higher-level masters. Perhaps the two of them had always been one. Taking the Burning Legion as an example, they basically deduced the power of shadow and fire from dark energy. On this basis, the Eridar warlocks appeared, and then there were the so-called Death Knights and Demon Hunters and other branches. If one used the weak and one-sided power system mastered by mortals to work backwards, they might eventually be able to trace back to the origin of the power of this universe. From Duque's point of view, this was the most reliable and practical path to the pinnacle of power. This path seemed to take the longest detour, but it was the most dependable, and one would not be fooled by the so-called predecessors. It was a pity that the way to embark on this path was to keep trying. Just like the scientists before he transmigrated, they would constantly face failure in almost endless attempts, and then learn from each setback, constantly perfecting themselves, and finally open the door to the pinnacle of power in the universe. To find such a key in this vast universe was not a chore that could be described with the word difficult. To be honest, even Duque himself was not confident that he would succeed. But he could already predict what the future would be like. Either he could directly surpass the limits of the world, dismantle the distorted void and beat up Sargeras. Or, actually, the upper limit of the power system of Azeroth was very high. Even if it did not work out, he could go with the flow and convince Xing to release the upper limit of power in advance, and nurture a large number of demigods in advance. At that time, a large number of demigods would be wearing full sets of divine equipment. That glorious orange light, even if they could not fight, could frighten the Burning Legion's Void Lords to the point that they could not take care of themselves. But if he were to take this path, many would still have to train. At this moment, after confirming the fall of Si Thun, the 4 dragon aspects, led by Alexstrasza, turned into human forms and walked over. The Red Dragon Queen circled one hand around Duque's neck, and without a care in the world, she stuck Duque under her armpit. Oh, Duque boy, we really look at you in a different light. I didn't expect you to be able to support the Wormrest Matrix through Onyxia, and even communicate with the will of the planet. Actually, the Wormrest Temple has a dragonification spell, are you interested? Get lost. I'm doing well as a magic demigod for humans and elves, I'm not going to be your subordinate. And that thing can at most turn a human into a half-dragon, right? It's useless. No? It's very useful, at least I can see you with a tail growing out of your butt. Damn, what kind of bad taste was this? Alright, seeing that Alexstrasza had used the dragon's peak to stare at his face, he felt quite good, so a gentleman like Duque decided to bear with it. Thank you again, Duque. Isra came up and politely bowed to Duque. You're welcome. If you could control the more radical druids, I would be very grateful. Duque glanced at Fandral Staghelm, who had been acting like a bystander throughout the entire process. Since Tyron was unwilling to attack this fellow, Duque could not directly attack him. But Duque was quite willing to give Fandral some trouble. I will. Although Isra did not quite understand, he still agreed. Chapter 1363. According to the knowledge of the Night Elf Druids, the Druid doctrine originated from the demigod Cenarius. The forest demigod Cenarius was the embodiment of the natural life essence of Azeroth. Very few people knew of the deep relationship between Cenarius and the Emerald Dream Dragon Queen Isra. In many people's impression, the two were lovers, but in reality, Isra was Cenarius' adoptive mother. Giving Fandral a little trouble was just that. Duque did not have the mood to deal with Fandral Staghelm. After all, with Fandral's status, it was no longer worth Duque to deal with him personally. The dragon aspects were all very busy. It was already very rare for Duke to make use of the time difference to get them to help him out. Protecting planet Azeroth was a mission that was branded into their souls. Unless their entire dragon soul was corroded like Nesario, that sense of mission would naturally drive them to fulfill their duty of protection. Don't let me find out that you're abusing magic. Maligo still disliked Duque no matter what. Seeing as they had fought Si Thun to death together, Malygos was already giving him face by not flaring up on the spot. Alexstrasza was just about to say something, but Malygos had already waved his hand, opened a portal and ran away. Sorry, he's just like that. The Red Dragon Queen was a little embarrassed. It's fine, I'm used to it. Duque looked in the direction where Malygos had disappeared and took a deep look. The second to run was the Bronze Dragon King. I'll look for you if there's anything. Yes, if you collect those bugs, remember to take care of them. If they run to the Tanaris Desert again, I'll hold you accountable. Nozdormu was very straightforward. He turned into a cloud of yellow sand and disappeared in the open space. This time Duque touched his nose, a little embarrassed. Duque noticed that in the system notification, there was a message about the Karaji twin emperors looking for him. In the fierce battle with Si Thun just now, Duque naturally eliminated all factors that would interfere with his battle. The affairs of the magic net were all handed over to Karthika. Everything else was even more, don't look for me if there's anything and don't look for me if there's nothing. Now that a bunch of deities were pulling him aside to talk, he had no time to care about them. The remaining 2 female dragon aspects were easy to talk to. Duque, I really have to thank you this time. Isra, with her eyes closed, gave Duque the impression that she was a gentle girl no matter when he looked at her. Of course, in reality, Isra wasn't that weak. Duque suddenly thought of something. It was a scene that should have happened in history but did not happen in this world. That's right. What's up with the 4 guardians of the Emerald Dream, Laythorn, Amelise, Taylor and Isidri recently? Duque seemed to mention something that made no sense. Isra tilted his head and showed a curious expression. That's strange. You have almost no contact with druids, and you don't know anything about the Emerald Dream. How did you know the name of my guardian? How did he know? Wasn't it because I had cleared them 10,000 times when I was playing the game? 10,000 times. Back then, I was shameless enough to have my members set their alarm clocks and open 4 Smurf accounts in Grey Valley, Twilight Forest, Faralas and the Hinterlands, waiting for these 4 green dragon bosses to appear. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. As expected, there had been a large deviation in the history of this world. Normally, before Karaj opened the door, these 4 green dragons that were originally the guardians of the Emerald Dream should have been corrupted by the power of darkness and fallen into madness. But now, for some reason, there was no news of them at all. Although the shameless Duque had forgotten about these second-rate green dragons, he didn't mind spoiling it. Isra, actually, when I returned from the ancient war 10,000 years ago, I peeked into many scenes of the future. One of them was before Karaj opened the door. Your 4 guardians were corrupted by the power of the army and the King of Nightmares? Isra's face instantly became transparent. This wasn't an exaggeration. She had really moved her soul and body to another dimension. Alexstrasza panicked. Why didn't you say so earlier? Duque looked like he was in pain. Anyone who casually reveals the pulse of fate will suffer the backlash of fate. Many powers in the world were equivalent. Although the dragon aspects, which were created by the Titans, were very powerful, their power actually came from the planet of Azeroth itself. As a reward for protecting the planet and abiding by their oath, they had that basically unnatural ability and could replenish their energy from the planet. Duque's words really made Alexstrasza speechless. In a sense, Duque couldn't spoil it directly, but he could prepare in advance. This was already very good to everyone. The Emerald Dream was very huge. When not in battle, the dragons were more solitary in nature and had a habit of sleeping. This meant that Isra and the other green dragons were more like a queen and a vassal. They wouldn't interact unless there was something important. Not seeing each other for decades or even centuries was not a big deal. If Duque didn't mention it, Isra wouldn't even think of looking at her subordinates. After a few seconds, the human form of Isra became solid again. Thank you, Duque. Something really happened to those guys. Isra's expression was solemn. How is it? Is it serious? Alexstrasza was very nervous. It's quite serious. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be beyond repair. Isra lightly bowed to Duque like a lady. I'm sorry. Although I wanted to talk more with you, it seems that I have to leave now. Go ahead. Duque nodded. Leave the void battlefield to us. Her big sister patted her chest. If I'm not here. Isra was a little hesitant. What? Don't we still have 4 guardian dragons? Alexstrasza directly grabbed Onyxia, who was trying to retreat, like an eagle grabbing a chick. Mistress, I've bled for you, I've blocked a knife for you, I've been your mount, you can't ignore me like this. Onyxia's plaintive voice was truly frightening and could make anyone who heard it cry. If one didn't know the reason, they would really think that Duque was some scumbag who played with a girl's body and mind and then heartlessly abandoned her. Damn it. I'm asking you to be a guardian dragon for a while, not to die. Duque flew up without hesitation and kicked Onyxia away. Yo, little female dragon, I think you still need to be taught a lesson. In the Pentashade dragon tribe, no one dares to ignore me. That wasn't a request just now, it was an order. Ah, no. Chapter 1364. My dear Onyxia, although I would like to play dragon taming with you when I have time, I cannot disobey the king's orders. Have a safe journey, dear. Duque heartlessly waved goodbye, which made Onyxia break down. She asked directly through the soul connection. That tearful voice would break even the most cold-hearted person's heart. Master, my dear master, are you really so heartless? After I became your mount, I have never rebelled. I have always done my best to complete the tasks you give me. For so long, even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. Are you really willing to let me go to that damned place with no gold, no treasure, and nothing but broken stones and endless demons? Am I just a thug and a plaything that you can throw away when you are tired of playing with me? As Onyxia struggled, she revealed the Dragon's Valley, intentionally or unintentionally. Duque swallowed his saliva and said slowly through the soul connection, when you come back, you will see a dragon bed made of pure gold and karazhan, specially made for you to sleep on. When Onyxia heard this, her eyes suddenly turned into 2 shiny gold coins. Really? You are not lying to me? I don't want a human-sized toy. I want one that I can sleep on in my dragon form. This is your master's promise, Duque said heroically. Onyxia bit her red lips. Alright, if you really do it after I come back, I am willing to add one more item to the dragon taming list. You can decide the specifics. It's a deal. Deal. Alexstrasza naturally had no way of knowing the soul communication between this master and servant, nor did she know what kind of dirty deal they had reached. She only knew that this evil little female dragon, who had no interest in guarding the Dragon Sleep Temple, suddenly glowed, gave up struggling and was willing to work for her. Well, no matter what, this was a good thing. She glanced at Duque and Duque gave her an okay gesture. Blinking, the Red Dragon Queen was still a little worried. You didn't pay a terrible price, did you? No. Onyxia is my most loyal mount. A little reward is only right. Besides, it won't hinder me in any way. That's good. Alexstrasza would never know how shameless a transmigrator could be. Golden Dragon Bed? Duque wouldn't go out of his way to do something so valiant and arrogant. But Duque was going to open a bank. That's right. After Duque had devoted himself to farming for 22 years, the resources of the Alliance had reached an extremely abundant level. As a result, there were more and more economic problems, the biggest of which was currency transactions. In the past, even before the formation of the Alliance, every country used the Arazuo gold coin as a unified currency. Gold characters were very expensive. Everyone agreed that they were very valuable. Seemed to be all right. In the past, buying a top-notch warhorse would only cost a few gold coins. Now that the Alliance was playing with high technology, when large-scale military products like steam tanks came out, the cost could easily be thousands of gold coins, or even tens of thousands or millions of gold coins. With such a shocking cost, using gold coins to trade was simply asking for death. The Alliance had already begun to use gold notes to replace gold coins, but the merchants didn't approve of it. Duque had already decided to issue paper money. To give paper money value, apart from the best security measures, there had to be enough collateral. As a transmigrator, the easiest thing to think of was a gold standard with gold as the core. In the early American economic system before transmigration, paper money could be issued with as much gold as there was gold. Therefore, the key to issuing paper money was that there had to be enough gold in the Alliance. This gold couldn't be touched. Before Onyxia returned, Duque would specially send people to guard it. When she returned, so what if it became a bed for her to sleep on? He could even say that the Alliance had specially found a demigod dragon to guard the gold. Duque wasn't worried at all that Onyxia would be corrupted. Giant dragons all had serious hoarding habits. They would hide all the valuable treasures in their lair and not give them to anyone. Otherwise, why would so many brave warriors slay dragons since ancient times? It was very simple. To get rich. The gold bars were all collateral anyway, and Duque wouldn't take them out for cash. It didn't matter at all. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Duque had never once said, "I will give you all the gold." As for the security in exchange of paper money, that was even simpler. As a demigod of the weave, Duque himself had the most profound magic in the world. He could design a barcode on the paper money. As long as a simple money detector was placed in a place where the weave could reach, it would immediately be able to identify the authenticity of any paper money. If anyone dared to counterfeit it, the weave would immediately send them back. Duque definitely wouldn't mind his elemental emissaries suddenly jumping out from the weave to teach those counterfeiters a lesson. In Duque's mind, as long as he had enough elemental emissaries, he would definitely be able to deal with these situations. Yes, his plan worked. After sending off the 4 dragon aspects, Tyrant walked over and whispered, "Goddess Elun asked me to tell you that when you're done, you can go to the moon goddess shrine as a guest. But this matter isn't urgent." Yes. The gods' business was with the gods and the mortals' business was with the mortals. After sending off those high-ranking guys, Thrall could finally come over. He brought Wajin, Magni and William over. "Are you satisfied with the loot this time?" Duque asked Thrall with a smile. Sar grinned, revealing his long fangs. Phew, I finally don't have to listen to those guys complaining about how the Alliance heroes have better equipment than the Horde heroes. A heaven-defying victory, coupled with the generous spoils of war, could resolve many conflicts without a trace. Even the Sun King Anastrian, who had lost the most manpower, now had the Dark Storm gauntlets, the Cloak of Clarity, and the Ancient God's Embrace on his waist. These pieces of equipment produced by Si Thun that the powerhouses of the Alliance looked down upon were now nothing to him. The Sun King wouldn't show any dissatisfaction with Thrall at this time. Magni said, "When you were busy just now, Thrall and Wajin proposed to us that they hoped the Horde and the Alliance would sign a closer cooperation agreement. If possible, it would be better to sign it in the form of an alliance." After Magni finished speaking, Thrall and Wajin's uneasy expression said everything. At this time, the strength of the Alliance and the Horde was not equal. To some extent, this was an alliance request that was not based on strength but purely based on feelings. A majestic lion would never try to make an antelope its ally. No leader in their right mind would have agreed to it under such circumstances. Unexpectedly, Duke nodded, "It's not a big problem. As for the specific details, let the people below discuss it." Chapter 1365. With regards to Duque's straightforward agreement, not only did the Horde feel incredulous, but even William felt that it was a little too easy for the Horde. William would never forget how his father had died. He hadn't died during the terrifying evacuation of Stormwind City, nor had he died in the cruel second battle of the Dark Portal. In fact, he had fought on the front lines time and time again without suffering any injuries. Yet he had died in an assassination attempt by the Orcs. As someone who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, Duque should have hated the Orcs the most. Why had Duque agreed? Was it too hasty? Or was it purely emotional? William didn't speak. He was a king and a strong man. However, when placed in the entire alliance, he was lacking in terms of strength, experience, knowledge, and judgment. Unlike the William in history who had to stand up and carry the flag, the current William still had Duque to protect him from the wind and rain. Perhaps his growth would be slower, but compared to the short-tempered and violent William who had been dominated by the Ghost Wolf for a long time, he would make fewer mistakes and grow more steadily. Suddenly, William remembered what Bolvar for Dragon had said. As the regent left behind by the previous king, William worshipped Anduin Lothar the most, and accepted all of Anduin's opinions unconditionally. After Anduin's death, Duque had disappeared time and time again. The first time it had been 10 years and the second time it had been 4 years. During the period when William was growing up, Duque was basically a name that only existed in legends. Hence, the elder that William trusted the most was Bolvar. Bolvar's evaluation of Duque was as follows. Apart from those who can't be shown in public, there are only 2 kinds of commanders in the world. One is the one who uses all the resources at hand to achieve victory, and the other is the one who obtains all the resources needed to achieve victory before the battle begins. The so-called battle is just a formality. Obviously, Duque is the latter. Bolvar's evaluation had always been deeply imprinted in William's mind. Listen more. Do more. He could ask, but he could not make things difficult for Duque. Because when Duque does things, there's always something that ordinary people like us can't understand. And every time he'll prove that he's right. This was Bolvar's most important advice. Hence, William stood at the side and listened quietly like an obedient junior. Duque's promise made Sal and Wajin overjoyed. Thank you. Duke Marcus, although I can't say that a human is the best friend of an orc, I have to say that you are the most trustworthy human in the tribe. Sal extended his hand and firmly shook Duque's. Duque sighed. This is all because of Azeroth. Moreover, no one in Azeroth knows what kind of enemy we are going to face next. I can only say that in the coming days, no one can relax their combat readiness. The Burning Legion still had the terrifying commander kill Jaden. Of the several evil ancient gods, only Si Thun came out. As a leader, I must prepare for the worst. Then your most pessimistic view is? Duque gritted his teeth. These guys mentioned above will all come out to cause trouble in the next 10 years. Sal and Wajine's expressions turned cold at the same time. If what Duque said was right, then the Alliance indeed had no reason to launch a war against the Horde. Fighting among themselves in front of a great enemy was really courting death. I understand. I will prepare the combat readiness plan and arrange it. On the other side, Kane also ran over, exchanged a few pleasantries and took Sal away. As the victors, the Horde warriors were also eager to see their leader and hear his victory declaration. As for the spoils of war, there was not much trouble. Basically, it was settled after a few words of discussion. When all the tribes had left and only the Alliance was left, William finally asked the question in his heart, Uncle Duke, will those terrible things really happen? Phew. Duque exhaled, then handed a note to William. It's not a question of whether or not it will happen. It has already happened. After quickly reading the translated coded letter, William's eyes suddenly shrank. No wonder when you finished fighting Hacker and wanted to pull the troops over to Kalimdor, I stopped you in Stormwind City on the grounds of insufficient transport capacity. Duque smiled. In this Battle of Silithus, the soldiers sent by the Alliance were mainly dwarves and gnomes, and they forcefully bombarded the battlefield. There were not many infantry soldiers and they were basically second-tier legions. None of the famous Scarlet Cross Legion or Griffin Legion came. Anyway, on the Alliance's side there were orcs and taurens on foot, trolls and night elves on long range, and the forgotten mages on the mages' side. It was completely enough. In the face of a great enemy no one played any tricks. The result was naturally a happy one. Who would have thought that Duque had already secretly detained the main force, ready to send them all to the Dark Portal at any time? Everything was based on one name, Draenor. It was also commonly known as the Outland. Now, the situation there had already undergone major changes. After Illidan's Stormrage was defeated by Arthas, who had yet to become a Lich King, he ran to the Outland to cause trouble, just like in history. However, in this life he did not have Kael, that's as an accomplice. There was no Kai Z, who was now officially appointed by the Alliance as the leader of the Outland Dispatch Army. As an upright high elf prince, after washing away his shame in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, he was once again revered as a hero by the elves, and Queen Sylvanas did not stop her people from seeking refuge with Kael. That's the biggest difference from the original history was that Kai Z should have led the Blood Elves to beat the bitter Draenei like dogs, and even occupied their old nest in Draenor, the Storm. Now history had changed drastically. Kai Z seemed to be guided by fate and ran to the Storm again. However, this time the Draenei were almost wiped out by the fell Orc army, and they had nowhere to go, so they sent a request for help. Kai Z's sense of justice was overflowing, and he brought his elves to help. This made Duque, who was familiar with history, feel very amused. Are we going to war again? Magni asked calmly. No, not so fast. I plan to give some support and then let Kael, that's hold on for a while longer. That's good. The Alliance's morale is still okay, but the soldiers' physical strength and the country's financial resources are at their limits. Magni sighed. Without Duque's economic development plan, the Alliance would probably be even more miserable. Chapter 1366. It was fine to fight the war to defend the country. That was a war where even if they lost their pants they wouldn't even frown. But suddenly, in order to kill evil, they had to travel across the galaxy and send a larger army to another world. It was conceivable that this would cause widespread debate within the Alliance. Now that Duque said that they needed to slow down, it would undoubtedly make the people below heave a sigh of relief. Duque turned to William. You just wanted to ask me why I want to form an alliance with the Horde, right? Yes, that's right. May I ask whose territory is Draenor? Everyone heard this and immediately understood. Even after the terrifying explosion, according to the intelligence, there were still many orcs living on the shattered Draenor planet. Duque continued, if the Horde is just this one in Azeroth, even if the orcs, taurens, trolls, goblins and the Forsaken are united, how many people can they have? 200,000 at most. Not to mention 200,000, even if the Horde had a population of 1 million I wouldn't care. But it's different in Draenor. Queen Sylvie, who had just been playing with the spoils of war, strode over. How many horde are there in Draenor? Adult warriors no less than 3 million. Now the latest intelligence is that Illidan is acting as the Burning Legion's pawn, working with the Lord of the Abyss, Magtheridon, in an attempt to turn all orcs into fell orcs. This means that if Illidan succeeds, we will have to face 10 million strengthened orcs. After saying this, Duque added, at least. This time the whole audience gasped. Duke continued to ask, are there people who are thinking, at least we still control the dark portal? Kalia shook her head. Just like how we chose to destroy Karaj's worm nest to prevent it from giving birth to more worms to harm the world. This time we will not let those who tried to destroy Azeroth go. Relying on defense alone would never be reliable. Passive defense was the choice of the weak. The real defense line was never those fortresses built on the pass, but a stronger army. Phew, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. It was great to have Tyreenas out of the way. The entire alliance was under his control, and he didn't have to worry about anyone holding him back. At this time he said slowly, that's why I agreed to form an alliance with the Horde. My biggest hope is to let Sar re-establish contact with the orcs of Draenor and let him organize the orcs to fight against Illidan's army. Could it be? Duque knew that Magni wanted to ask if he would release the tiger back into the mountains. Duque shook his head. According to history, Sar would have returned to Nagrand in the Outland and become a disciple of a master, stepping onto the path of nature and changing from a simple warrior to a true shaman. This Sal would be a more selfless and harmless leader. The Beastmen aren't the only powers in the Outer Realms. I have ordered Kale that's to deal with the race that calls itself the Draenei. If possible, I hope to absorb the Draenei into the Alliance because these Draenei believe in the path of the Holy Light, just like us. At this point, Duque lightly hammered Theon's breastplate with his fist. Among the many races in Azeroth, the dwarves, gnomes and elves mostly formed an alliance with the humans because of benefits. The Draenei, on the other hand, joined the alliance because of their religion and ideals. In Duque's eyes, the Draenei joining the alliance was a matter of course. Moreover, the leader of the Draenei was Valen. The respectable Valen was also known as the Immortal. He had witnessed the destruction of countless worlds by the hands of the Burning Legion, and was one of the few people who could remember all of these worlds. Valen's origins were unknown, but in his hometown, Argus, he was once a respectable leader. 25,000 years ago, the Dark Titan, Sargeras, had promised the people of Velan infinite power, but he had wisely rejected it. He foresaw that accepting this power would bring endless disasters. However, the other two leaders of Eridar, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, agreed to Sargeras' deal. Valen realized that he no longer had a place in Argus. He and his brave followers rebelled against the Dark Titan, and with the help of the mysterious holy light creature, Naru, escaped Argus. These brave exiles began to call themselves the Draenei, or the Exiles. Who knew that Kil'jaeden, who had surrendered to Sargeras, had been organizing a demon army in the past 25,000 years, not letting these Draenei go. Valen fought with the demon army for thousands of years, until he led his people to the world where the barbaric beastmen lived. This became the refuge of this group of wanderers. They named this new world Draenor. By the way, the beastmen didn't recognize the name Draenor. Basically, they would only call their homeland, our world. Valen and his people lived a relatively peaceful and stable life in Draenor for hundreds of years. Although they knew that it was only a matter of time before the Burning Legion found them, they still worked very hard to coexist peacefully with the other races here. Unfortunately, because a troublesome shaman named Nazul discovered Kil'jaeden's will in the void, he was tricked, and so there were all kinds of conflicts between the Beastmen and the Draenei. Under Nazul's tricking, the various Beastmen clans gathered together, formed the Old Tribes, and directly broke through the largest settlement of the Draenei in Draenor, the holy city Shotrath. The miserable Draenei had no fixed residence for a time, and were forced to Zangarmarsh. Many Draenei even lost their minds, and became like wandering ghosts, wandering in the swamp. Now Duque was very sure that Valen, the ancient prophet, was very clear that the Draenei would face a new threat. The Immortal had to protect his people, otherwise the entire Draenei race would be swallowed by darkness. And the appearance of the Alliance just happened to be the biggest opportunity for the Draenei to survive and multiply. Kale that sent a letter saying that the leader of the Draenei, Valen, wishes to meet me, Duque said. Are you going? Jaina asked. Yes, of course I'm going, but not now. The Alliance needs rest and time. At this point, Duque patted William's shoulder. William, Go on my behalf and reach a preliminary agreement with Valen, okay? I still have to busy myself with the magic net. Okay, Uncle Duque. A sharp light flashed in William's eyes. He knew that this was a rare opportunity to sharpen himself and prove himself. After a simple discussion, Duque first returned to Naxxramas, and then he summoned the twin emperors. With a smack, he threw C. Thun's tentacle on the ground. Okay, you two, is there anything else you're hesitating about? That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.